Hi, my name's Phil and welcome to LabourVision, where we talk about Labour policies. And in this video, I'd like to discuss the latest from last week, where Labour and the unions confirmed that the Workers' New Deal is, well, still in the same shape. So not a lot to report there. And Labour launched the next phase of the general election campaign with the My First Steps. So, yeah, there was talk of some watering down of certain aspects of the Workers' New Deal last week. And I said I wanted to wait for that sort of meeting to happen. Some of the wording to certain policies had seemed to change in a fairly ambiguous way. It didn't necessarily mean that the actual policies had changed, but it did suggest at least a longer time frame for implementing some of them. And unions were concerned that some business leaders had lobbied for delays or changes, but after the meeting last week, everyone seems happy that the policies have remained in their summer 2023 state, although there is supposed to be confirmation of this in a few weeks at the next meeting. But for now, as you were, nothing seems to have changed. So what was of more interest was Labour's My First Steps campaign. Ridiculed by the Tories, of course, who presented Starmer as a sort of a toddler. And in isolation, you can see the joke, and I confess to thinking to myself, yeah, that is an odd way to phrase it, isn't it? But is it the right way to phrase it? The answer inevitably will be, of course. Unlike the Conservatives, Labour have invested a lot of resources into identifying key swing voters and then really pinning down what they want and what will appeal most to them. The 6 policies on the card, which I shall go through in a bit, as Starmer has pointed out, they're not the party's only policies. They're going to do more than 6 things in government. They're not even really their most important policies. They are, well, yeah, their first steps, as they say. In reality, they are the 6 policies which they have found appeal most to target swing voters, which are the ones who are going to be paying attention to the national campaign and, news. So the ones who will form the backbone of the general election campaign. So what was interesting was that the Tories' first reaction was to complain that Labour are secretly planning on tax rises. There's nothing secret about it, guys. The card, which will presumably find its way into letterboxes all over the country this summer, actually highlights it. Labour are pushing their tax rises in this campaign leaflet. They're saying, yeah, well, of course we're going to raise taxes. We're going to raise taxes on oil and gas companies. We're going to raise taxes on non-doms and other wealthy tax dodgers. There's going to be tax rises on private school fees. It's all there. The tax rises are all part of Labour's main message. It's just that there won't be tax rises for ordinary people, unlike with the Tories. Because economists are clear that the books aren't balanced right now. They say whoever wins the election is going to have to raise taxes. We can't afford the tax cuts that we've had this year. They say, so because Labour are openly saying, yeah, we're going to raise taxes, but we're going to raise it on those with the broadest shoulders. The Tories are the ones claiming they're going to carry on cutting them. But economists say, well, no, this is impossible. So they are the ones with the secret plans to raise them, not Labour. And if they have a secret plan to raise taxes, where are they going to be raising them? Another interesting aspect of the presentation, the one that stuck out for me, was an answer that Keir Starmer gave on the issue of the 2-child cap on benefits. Now, as I understood the situation, Labour had sort of ruled out removing the cap. Now, Starmer's answer seemed to change that. So either they're changing their tune or I got it wrong in the first place. Because the situation, as I've described it before, is removing the cap is the most efficient way of tackling child poverty. Experts all say that. It wouldn't on its own eradicate child poverty, but it's the one, if you had one move, experts say, yeah, this is the one that would do the most to help. Now, Labour have promised to tackle child poverty, and not just tackle as in ease it a little bit, actually end it, but not through removing the cap. So does that mean they have other ideas, less efficient ways of doing it? Or were they playing fast and loose with the language anyway? Because Labour also have a policy of fundamentally reforming universal credit. Now, if you get rid of universal credit anyway, or you change it, or you fundamentally reform it in some way, it's possible that the cap disappears without you having to remove the cap, politics. But in answering the question about the cap, Starmer said he would only promise policies before the election that he is in a position to implement. In other words, he's only going to announce policies before the election that he can put down a list and go, yes, we're doing this, and this is how we're costing it. But that moves the policy back into, I'm not telling you territory. In reality, I think the cap will be going, but I think, as before, it will probably be naturally dissolved as a consequence of these reforms of benefits. Starmer did, after all, not just reiterate his commitment to ending child poverty, but saying that it was central to what he wanted to achieve. So there is a definite policy of actually ending child poverty. So they can hardly, in government, then do nothing about it, or even do not enough about it. But in terms of the main campaign, the leaflet card thing will form the scaffolding for everything we'll hear in the mainstream media now, I think. Obviously, the Tory shills will attempt to knock them off track in interviews, but Labour will clearly want to move back to these 6 lines. And the wording is often as interesting as the policies themselves. So this is the card in my hot little hands. It's not the card like we had in 1997 that goes in the wallet. Actually, we've had other ones similar before. Foldy out thing. So it has the 6 steps on there, but on the back are some details with the specific wording. So it's worth going through some of these wordings. So the first one, deliver economic stability. Now, that's quite important because obviously something to do with the economy is always going to be in there. Deliver economic growth. No, it's not deliver economic growth, even though that is a policy of theirs. Deliver economic stability. So they've found that that is the wording that most appeals. And it's a good one because it undercuts Sunak. Because Sunak likes to pretend when he took over from Liz Truss, he stabilised the economy. But he hasn't. The economy isn't stable and people don't feel that it's stable. In fact, Starmer at the campaign launch said, when he was talking about, what change are Labour going to bring? It was stability would be change. He said stability is change because we don't have it right now. And then the actual blurb underneath it is, so deliver economic stability with tough spending rules so we can grow our economy and keep taxes, inflation and mortgages as low as possible. So although there are the other aspects of that, the main message is deliver economic stability. Then on to the second one, cut NHS waiting times. Now that is also interesting. I like that one a lot. NHS waiting lists is often the one-cited and it's the easiest one to find data on and all the rest of it. But what matters to people, and I've said this before, what matters to people is not how many people are on a waiting list. That doesn't matter. People don't know what's a big number. It was about 2 million when Labour were last in power. Now it's nearly 8 million. It's like, what matters to people is when I need treatment, how long does it take me? So I'm quite pleased that they say cut NHS waiting times, that Labour are going to put the emphasis on the time it takes to get that treatment, because that is actually what matters. And then the blurb underneath it is with 40,000 more appointments each week during week evenings and weekends, to which people have gone, oh, you're just going to make NHS workers work longer. It's like, no, don't be silly. They're going to need more staff. It's just that they will have, at the moment, there's quite a lot of procedures or checks and things like that that can only take place Monday to Friday. Whereas this will be like using the other 2 days as well. So during evenings and weekends, paid for. So yeah, there's going to be more staff because they know this is going to cost extra. Paid for by cracking down on tax avoidance and non-dom loopholes. So first tax rise in there straight away. 3, launch a new border security command with hundreds of new specialist investigators and use counter-terror powers to smash the criminal boat gangs. Now, one of the most interesting things about this is there's 6 things on it. Normally with a campaign, you have 5 things. Like, I assume psychologists know the answer to this, but it's always 5, isn't it? It's a 5-point plan, or it's 5 policies that you have. And it's not just, we always have this 5-point thing. Rishi Sunak had a 5-point plan at the beginning of 2023. Then towards the end of 2023, he changed it, but to a different 5-point plan. That seems to have fallen by the wayside as well. There were 5 things on the Labour card in 1997. There were 5 things when Ed Miliband in 2015. There's always 5. Everything's in 5. So they've gone 6. And apparently the reason is that this third one, the launch a new border security command, was really cutting through. They'd obviously already worked out that the other 5 were they needed to nail down, that were really attractive to those swing voters. I think I got the impression that they've added this one in as a 6th, even though it's number 3, because late in the day they realised that this was cutting through. Number 4, set up Great British Energy, and it says a publicly owned clean power company to cut bills for good and boost energy security, paid for, another tax, by a windfall tax on oil and gas giants. So yeah, another tax there, and not one that will bother ordinary people. And again, emphasising, I mean, there's multiple things in this. Publicly owned, so we're going to have some state, because quite a lot of our energy companies anyway are publicly owned, just not the British public, owned by other countries' governments. Emphasising here clean power, so it's moving us on to net zero. Cutting bills for good, obviously that's going to appeal to people, although they do point out the bills won't come down straight away. Boosting energy security, so they're going to make a lot of the fact that with fossil fuels it allows people like Vladimir Putin to exercise an unhealthy amount of control over the global economy, as well as obviously energy supplies. And of course the other thing, which isn't explicit in this but you know is also part of their message, is creating better jobs. So we're going to try and move people from working in high carbon industries to low carbon industries. And then, of course, as I say, paid for by a windfall tax on oil and gas giants. Fifth one, crack down on antisocial behaviour. There's always something like that in there, isn't there? You know, this is their focus on the crime thing. So obviously they've worked out from their target swing voters that it's antisocial behaviour that is their main policing issue. More neighbourhood police, paid for by ending wasteful contracts. We've had a lot of those. Tough new penalties for offenders, and a new network of youth hubs. Now that's a really important one. It's actually quite unusual, that as well, because although it's you could easily miss it, the youth hubs there. It's very unusual to have a policy explicitly for young people in something like this for a general election campaign, because young people don't tend to vote in large numbers. And as a result, although there's always policies, Labour always have policies that will benefit the young, they tend not to feature in the headline policies. You could argue, you know, when Labour in 1997, they talked about cutting class sizes, but that wasn't a policy for young people, because I mean, we're talking about primary school children, they don't vote. That was for the parents. Whereas this is explicitly for young people, the network of youth hubs. I have talked about these before, I think quite recently, actually. So go back in the playlist, you may find something on that. And then the sixth one, recruit 6,500 new teachers. That is for the parents. There's always going to be, in any Labour main platform, there's always going to be something on education and something on healthcare, isn't there? Recruit 6,500 new teachers. So interesting there, in 1997, the education policy was about cutting class sizes. This is about recruiting more teachers. Now, it does the same thing, arguably, because in order to cut class sizes before in the 1990s and into the 2000s, we needed to recruit more teachers. So the same thing here. But the emphasis now is on the teachers, which shows that parents are recognising that staff shortages are the real issue. And then it says, in key subjects to prepare children for life, work and the future, paid for... Next tax rise, paid for by ending tax breaks for private schools, which is also interesting. We know about the VAT on private school fees, which is upsetting the Telegraph a lot. But there are other tax breaks that private schools get as well. And it'd be interesting if some of those are tackled, even though Labour are not being explicit. Labour are trying to put all the attention on the VAT on school fees. But, and you know, you may find this surprising, there's more public money goes to a private school student than there is a student in state education, which is absolutely mad, that we as a taxpayer pay more for a child going to Eton than we do one going to the local comprehensive. So, or academy these days. But, so that's an interesting one. I wonder if they've got more private school tax breaks lined up that they're just not talking about. But anyway, there we go. That's the big Labour news from last week. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe for further content. And thanks for listening. And until next time, I'll see you later.